Well, hi there. This is Ron Rogers, and this is part two, the long-awaited, highly acclaimed. Well, I don't know about that, but the long-awaited part two of Grounded. The student that I was told by my flight commander to ground because the guy had a bit of an attitude problem, and he did. But the guy's sharp. I mean, the guy's really sharp, which made it difficult. But he says, "Well, you're going to ground him in the stand-up briefing." Like I explained in the previous video, so he can become properly humiliated. Maybe we can take that ego down a notch. And he says, you give him the standard oral at the end of the day to get back on flight status. And I want him to fail that too. So he's going to be grounded for 2 days. Maybe we can teach this guy a lesson. So I said, okay, sir, gotcha. I'll do that. So at the end of the day, I sat down with him. And I tell him, okay, we're going to have an extensive oral here. You're going to have to pass it. It's going to cover the flight manual, and it's going to cover the basic flight operations in primary flying jet. I'm going to ask you all sorts of systems questions, operational questions, and you're going to have to properly answer them to get off back on flight status. So we went through this. And I asked him question after question after question, and I spent like an hour going through this. Okay, it was very detailed, and it was very long, and it went into very in-depth knowledge. No trick questions yet, but it went into great knowledge, and the guy was doing a good job. And I mean, this was kind of fun. I mean, we're going through limits and all this stuff, airspeed, everything, and he knew it. He knew it cold. So it's making the task a little bit difficult. So I finally got to my kind of ringer question here, which was just kind of a, it's not a question we typically asked in any serious function, but it's a good question that if you know your nits, you know the answer to this question. So I said basically, okay, tell me which three things are 1750 on the T-37. And this is the first time I got a blank expression out of him. And he goes, what? I go, yeah, I want you to tell me what three things are 1750 on the T-37. And he goes, I don't know. And I said, okay, well, let's get out your dash one here. Let's get in the operating limitation section because this is a published operating limitation and you should know all the operating limitations on your aircraft, right? And he goes, well, yeah, okay. Okay, so let's look at here under hydraulic pressure. 1750. That is the max PSI on the hydraulic system when it is when you actually have a failure of the system and you have the relief valve functioning. The normal range is less than that, as you can see it depicted here, but once it's in bypass, 1750 is the number. Okay, I'll give you a chance. What are the other two? Nothing. Crickets. Blank, deer in the headlights. And for him, this was unusual. He wasn't at a loss for words no matter what it was. I said, okay, let's move to a couple more pages in the dash one. I said, first of all, okay, let's get in the UHF radio section here. And I said, we'll use my dash one here. And look I've even highlighted it for you. 1750, that's the number of UHF frequencies that are available. I said, that's number two. Okay. I said, I'll give you one more chance to get number three. And nothing. At least I gave him a chance, right? Yeah, I know. It's being chicken defecation here. It is. But that's part of what their training command was. Anybody who's been through it, there is a lot of chicken defecation in the Air Force. Okay. So I said, okay, let's look at the landing gear emergency extension system. Now, you've got a blowdown bottle, right? And he says you actually used it on the, you used it earlier today in the emergency procedure. I said, but there is a pressure range on that, isn't there? And I said, I've even highlighted this for you here. And I said, what's that pressure range? He says 200 plus or minus 250. And I said, so what's the upper range? And he goes, well, 2250. And I said, what's the lower range? And he goes, 1750. Does the math, figures it out. Guy's not stupid. And I said, okay, you are grounded. And he looks at me because he had gone an hour through this oral and he had not missed one single item that I had asked him. He was prepared and he was sharp, like I said, but I said, you are grounded. And he looks at me and he says, "You are grounding me for not knowing what three things were 1750?" And he's a little incredulous, because it's not something we use in everyday flying. Let me tell you that, typically. And I says, "No, I'm not grounding you really because you didn't know what three things were 1750. I'm grounding you because you were a smart," and then I use the more appropriate term that I can't use in polite company here and keep all my great ratings. Uh, and he kind of gets a little grin on his face and says, "Okay, I can relate to that." So the guy understood, and he understood what was going on here. And I said, "Now, we'll get you back on flight status tomorrow. We won't do another oral. That'll count good enough. We'll get you back a day after tomorrow. He's going to be ground for 2 days. We'll get you back on flight status, but you need to work on your attitude as a word to the wise." Okay, and he kind of took that. So I think we accomplished something there, and he understood what was going to happen and that he wasn't going to win this battle, and he might want to get his attitude adjusted. Well, unfortunately, it didn't stick. Well, he goes over to T-38s, and he does a real good job in T-38s. He's a good pilot, like I said, a good stick, and he knew his stuff, so he does very well in the T-38s. And, okay, he graduates, and, well, he could get a fighter, but at the time, ATC had the training command had their dibs on people. They wanted to be instructors, and they said, "Yeah, we might want to keep an eye out on this guy, and if you want to be under somebody's thumb, always being observed very carefully. Be an instructor in the training command, especially a plowback, first assignment IP instructor, and you are under a microscope there." So this was a way of keeping the guy watching him because they were worried that he tended to push the limits, and they wanted to keep a good eye on him. Okay, well, he's an instructor in the T-38s now. And he's doing across country. And you get high altitude, certain atmospheric conditions, and you get a nice contrail like this. And I've heard of people doing this. I've never done it. Actually, I did something similar in our R2508 Edwards airspace because that's not in the normal airspace when you're going cross country. Well, he was going cross country, and I think this actually occurred over Albuquerque, and he's the number 2 aircraft, and he goes, it'd look really cool for those people down in Albuquerque if I did a little spiral around the lead aircraft. Kind of make a candy cane is what it was, and it can look really kind of cool, but he got a little slow, and they were at fairly high altitude, I think maybe 39 or something like that. They were up there, and he flamed out both engines in the process, getting a little too slow because the T-38, and I flamed him out being outside the envelope, but that was actually during chase missions where they said, "You will fly here, and if it flames out, that's fine because we know you're outside the envelope, but we need you to be chase on this," and I digress. Okay, but anyway, he got outside the engine envelope, flamed out both engines. Now, the thing on the T-38, it's almost like there is a switch in the altimeter because you got two ways of restarting the engines. One, you put both throttles into afterburner, but what that does is closes down the nozzles and actually restricts your in-light environment, and it makes it smaller that you're going to get the light. So what you do is you leave the throttles where they are basically, and you hit the start switches, the 2 start switches, which is how you start engines normally. And what that does is excites the igniters because the engines are windmilling, so they're pumping gas into the turbine section. You hit the igniters, and when you have the proper mass flow, enough air going through, you got the right fuel-air mixture and stuff like that, it's going to light off. Well, in the number of times I've done this, it's like there is a switch in the altimeter because you are not getting those engines relit till you are below 25,000 feet. Okay, 39, 25,000. When you lose both engines, both radios go out. Okay, so you are gone. You can't talk to anybody. Your transponder goes, and you are descending through the airspace in. You are controlled, but you're going through, a lot of other possible traffic conflicts. This is not a good thing. Okay, I probably don't need to overstress that, but this is not a good thing to do. Well, he gets down below 25, and he restarts, gets his engines back up, gets his radios back working, and he says, "I need to go back up." And it's like, well, what are you doing down there? And you have traffic, and Air traffic control, this ATC, not Air Training Command, but this is air traffic control, they are not pleased. They are not pleased at all. They are extremely unhappy. And of course, there are a few phone calls back to Vance on this. Well, this guy ended up with a big egg on his face. He had to go around to both squadrons and he had to give a public presentation on how he screwed up. So he really got a comeuppance here in humility on this thing he had, as you will see. And I know, if you're watching this currently, you don't want to do this because eggs are extremely expensive. Okay, so you don't want to do this now. But anyway, this is probably an old egg. But yeah, he had egg on his face. He had to eat humble pie, and he was the low man in the squadron for quite a while. And after that, I left Vance, so I don't know what really happened to this guy at all. But I hope he finally got his act together and learned his lesson. Anyway, that is the story of the 2-day grounding of a student who needed an attitude correction. It's a little off the wall as far as what instructors should be doing, but I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting and informative and non-fattening. I don't think eggs are terribly fattening. But anyway, I hope you liked it. Thanks for watching.